When people asked me about marriage, I always said the same thing. It's like breathing, I would smile. Natural. Effortless. Home. Because that's what life with Emma felt like. Natural. We had been together since our early 20s, stumbling through adulthood hand in hand, first apartments, first real jobs, first big fights, first hard choices. We learned how to be adults together. We learned how to be partners. It wasn't glamorous or Instagram perfect. But it was ours, solid and steady, built on years of shared history and small, quiet moments. Every morning, Emma would make coffee while I walked the dog. Every night, she would fall asleep first, her hand resting lightly on my chest, her breathing a slow, steady rhythm against the chaos of the world outside. We had our routines. Our inside jokes. Our silent understandings, the way a raised eyebrow or a slight smile could say 1,000 words. In a world where everything felt increasingly unpredictable, Emma was my constant. My anchor. My safest place. Sure, we weren't the wild, passionate couple we had been in the beginning. The kind who stayed up all night talking, who couldn't keep their hands off each other in public. But what we had was deeper than that now. A kind of love that knew about overdue bills and ugly crying after long days. A love that survived petty arguments about cleaning the kitchen and whether or not we needed a new couch. It was real. It was tested. It was supposed to be forever. Looking back, maybe that was why I missed the signs. The late nights on her laptop, tapping away long after she said she was wrapping up work. The small smiles she sometimes wore when scrolling through her phone, private smiles I hadn't seen in years. The way she grew quieter during dinner, more thoughtful, her eyes distant even when she was sitting right across from me. I noticed, of course. But I didn't question. Because trust was the foundation of everything we had built. Without it, what were we? I didn't check her phone. I didn't ask why she sometimes seemed miles away. I trusted her. Blinded myself with that trust. Because the idea of her hiding something from me felt impossible. Unthinkable. We had withered too much together to be undone by something so small, so silly as a secret. Or so I thought. The first crack didn't come with a fight. Or a confession. Or even an argument. It came quietly. Softly. Almost casually. The way real earthquakes do, rumbling low beneath the surface, invisible, until the ground gives out from under you and you're left wondering how you didn't hear it coming. It was a Sunday afternoon. Emma was in the shower. I was tidying the living room, picking up stray socks, stacking her half-finished books into neat piles. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Normally, I wouldn't have even glanced at it. But the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Ben. Followed by a preview of the message. I miss talking to you. It feels like old times again. I froze. For a long moment, I just stared at it, the words burning themselves into my brain. I miss talking to you. Old times again. I knew, even before I picked up the phone. Some part of me knew. Because trust doesn't die in a single moment. It erodes. It decays. And when the truth finally cracks the surface, you realize the foundation you were standing on had been crumbling for a very, very long time. You just hadn't let yourself look down. And in that quiet living room, with the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows and Emma singing softly behind a closed bathroom door, I realized my marriage was not what I thought it was. And maybe it hadn't been for a very long time. The message haunted me long after the screen went dark. I miss talking to you. It feels like old times again. I stood there in the living room, feeling like the walls had closed in around me. My mind raced in frantic circles, trying to stitch together innocent explanations that didn't quite fit. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was an old friend she had lost touch with. Maybe it was a harmless conversation, blown out of proportion by my own insecurities. But deep down, in the quiet place we all keep our worst fears. I knew better. I didn't touch her phone. Not then. Not because I didn't want to. but because I was afraid of what I would find. Once you open that door, once you let the doubts flood in, you can never shut it again. You can never go back to the person you were before you knew. So I sat down on the couch, hands trembling slightly, and waited for Emma to come out of the shower. Waited for the moment where I could look into her eyes and really see if there was something she was hiding. She came out humming to herself, wrapped in a towel, her cheeks pink from the steam. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey, you," she said lightly, tossing her wet hair over her shoulder. "Miss me?" It was a joke. A familiar, teasing joke she had said 100 times before. But today, the words felt different. They scraped against the raw, aching place inside me. I smiled back, or at least, I tried to. "Of course," I said. And hated how natural it sounded. How easy it was to lie, even to myself. The next few days passed in a haze of almost normal. Emma cooked dinner. We watched TV together. We kissed goodnight. But something inside me had shifted. Something small but unstoppable. A quiet unraveling. I found myself watching her when she thought I wasn't looking. The way she lingered a little too long over her phone. The soft, secretive smiles. The slight tension in her shoulders when I entered the room unexpectedly. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't damning. But it was enough. Enough to plant seeds of doubt that sprouted into ugly, thorny vines inside my chest. One night, long after Emma had gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at her phone left charging on the counter. It would be so easy. Just a swipe. Just a glance. Just enough to either ease my fears or confirm them. My hands hovered over it, guilt battling with desperation. "Trust her," a voice in my head whispered. "You owe her that." But another voice, sharper, colder, whispered back. "Trust is earned. Trust can be broken. And if she's hiding something, don't you deserve to know?" In the end, it wasn't even a choice. It was a compulsion, a survival instinct. With shaking fingers, I unlocked her phone. She hadn't changed the passcode in years, the same 4 numbers we used for everything, the date of our first kiss. My chest tightened at the memory even as my thumb moved on autopilot. The messages were easy to find. Not hidden, not deleted. Just tucked away in a folder labeled simply, Ben. Hundreds of texts. Stretching back months. Maybe longer. At first, they were casual. "How have you been? Remember that night at the beach?" But slowly, almost imperceptibly, they grew heavier. More intimate. Laced with memories, regrets, old jokes only they understood. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't been so young. I still think about you when certain songs come on. Talking to you feels like coming home. Each word was a hammer blow against the foundation I had built my life on. And then, buried deep in the thread, a message from Emma. "I love my husband. But sometimes I miss what we had. I miss who I was with you." I sat back, the phone slipping from my fingers, my heart thudding painfully against my ribs. I love my husband. But the most dangerous word in the English language. But because everything before it becomes meaningless. Because love followed by regret is no longer love. It's a memory. A ghost. A lie you tell yourself to make betrayal sound less cruel. I stayed up all night reading those messages. Every sentence a small betrayal. Every joke a wound reopened. Every fond memory a blade against my heart. By dawn, I felt hollow. Not angry. Not even heartbroken. Just empty. Like the life I had spent a decade building had been made of smoke and paper. Beautiful from a distance. But never strong enough to survive a real storm. Emma stirred awake around 7, padding into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. She smiled sleepily when she saw me. "Morning," she murmured, reaching for the coffee pot. I watched her move around the kitchen, the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted with every piece of myself, and wondered how much of her I had ever really known. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words caught in my throat. Because how do you ask someone when exactly they stopped choosing you? How do you ask them if they even noticed? If they even cared? And so I said nothing. Not yet. Because sometimes, the truth needs a little time to settle inside you. Sometimes, you have to let the pieces of your world fall completely apart before you can figure out how, or if, to begin putting them back together. The next few days passed like moving through a fog. I went to work. I smiled at coworkers. I answered emails. But none of it felt real. Everywhere I turned, I saw her. Emma laughing at a joke over dinner. Emma lying next to me, breathing softly in her sleep. Emma texting, fingers flying across the screen with a smile she rarely showed me anymore. I was living two lives. The one where everything looked normal. And the one where I knew the truth and couldn't unknow it. At first, I told myself I could forget. That it didn't mean anything. They hadn't met up, hadn't crossed any physical lines. It was just words. Just old memories. Just something she needed to get out of her system. But late at night, when the apartment was dark and her hand rested lightly against my back, I couldn't lie to myself. It wasn't just words. It was longing. It was regret. It was a part of her heart that wasn't mine anymore, maybe hadn't been for a long time. And worst of all? She had given that part of herself away without ever telling me. Without even letting me fight for it. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. Emma was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, laughing softly at something on the screen. The sound hit me like a punch to the gut. A laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. A laugh meant for someone else. For him. For Ben. I dropped my keys on the table harder than necessary. She looked up, startled. "Hey," she said brightly. "You're home early." I nodded, shrugging out of my jacket, heart pounding in my chest. There was a beat of silence. Long enough for her to sense something was wrong. Long enough for her smile to falter. "Everything okay?" she asked, setting her phone down carefully on the coffee table. I sat across from her, staring at her like I was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not the woman I had built my world around. Not the safe harbor I had clung to. But a stranger with my heart in her hands. And no idea what to do with it. "Who's Ben?" I asked quietly. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, to deny, to explain, to lie, I don't know. But nothing came out. Just silence. Heavy. Awkward. Accusing. I waited. I gave her a chance to be honest. To tell me the truth on her own. After a long moment, she looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. "He's someone from before you," she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Someone I used to love." I nodded slowly, feeling the words sink into my skin like ice. "Why him?" I asked. "Why now?" She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "I don't know," she whispered. It started as a hello. Just catching up. I didn't mean for it to turn into anything. But it did, I said. Not a question. A statement. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," she choked out. And maybe she was. Maybe she really, truly was. But apologies don't stitch broken trust back together. They're just bandages on wounds that keep bleeding. "Did you love him more?" I asked after a long pause, the words scraping my throat raw. She looked up, horrified. "No," she said quickly. "No, it's not about that. I love you. I've always loved you." But even as she said it, I heard the unspoken words underneath. "I love you, but..." Always that but. Always that invisible wall between what we were and what she had been reaching for when she thought I wasn't looking. I trusted you, I said softly. More than anyone. I built my life around you, Emma. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. And maybe she did. Maybe that's what made it worse. That she knew exactly what she was tearing down, and still did it anyway. We sat there for a long time, the evening sun bleeding through the windows, casting long, aching shadows across the room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to grab her and shake her and demand why I wasn't enough, why 10 years together wasn't enough. But I didn't. Because some part of me already knew the answer. Sometimes, it's not about being enough. Sometimes, it's about people chasing the versions of themselves they think they lost. Even if it means losing the people who never stopped loving them. I don't know how we come back from this, I said finally. She reached for my hand across the coffee table, desperation written all over her face. Please, she whispered. Please don't give up on us. I wanted to. I wanted to grab that hand, hold on, pretend none of this had happened. Pretend we could rewind to the days before secrets and doubt and the gnawing ache in my chest. But I couldn't. Because even if we stayed together, something between us had cracked wide open. And no matter how tightly we held on, some things, once broken, can never be put back the same way again. The days after that conversation blurred together into something I can only describe as gray. Not black, not white, just an endless, dull ache of existence where nothing felt real anymore. We continued living under the same roof, sharing the same bed, making coffee in the same kitchen. But every small action was weighed down by what we didn't say. By the space between us that had become too wide, too silent, too broken. Emma tried. In her own way. She started texting me more during the day, silly memes, updates about her day, little I miss you messages. She suggested date nights. She laughed a little too loudly at my jokes. She touched my hand whenever she could, holding on just a second too long. I wanted to let her. God, I wanted to let her. I wanted to believe that if we just pretended hard enough, we could erase the words she had written to another man late at night when she thought I was sleeping. But pretending would have been a betrayal of everything we once were. Everything we had promised each other. I couldn't unsee the truth. I couldn't unknow it. No matter how much I wished I could. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the same question looping endlessly in my mind. Can love survive betrayal? Not the betrayal of bodies. Not a physical act. But the betrayal of hearts. Of secrets whispered in the dark. Of memories shared with someone else when those memories should have been ours. One evening, about a week after I found the messages, I sat alone on the balcony, nursing a glass of whiskey, watching the city lights blur into a watercolor of gold and black. Emma came out quietly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. For a moment, we just sat there, side by side, not speaking. The night air was cool, carrying the distant sounds of laughter from the street below. A reminder that somewhere, life was moving on. Even as mine stood still. I love you, she said finally, her voice breaking the silence. I turned my head to look at her. She looked so small under that blanket. So vulnerable. A part of me, the part that still remembered our first kiss, our first apartment, our late-night talks about the future, ached to wrap her in my arms and say, I love you too. It's enough. We'll be okay. But another part, the part that remembered the messages, the secrets, the ache of betrayal, stayed silent. Do you love me enough to stay? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It was an honest question. A heartbreaking one. And it deserved an honest answer. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything we had been and everything we had lost pressing down on my chest. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if love is enough anymore. She didn't cry. She just nodded, like she had expected it. Like she had already made her peace with the possibility of losing me. Maybe she had been grieving us too, long before I found the messages. Maybe we had both been pretending longer than we realized. That night, I packed a small bag. Not because I didn't love her. Not because I wanted to hurt her. But because sometimes, love is not enough. Sometimes, you have to choose yourself. Your sanity. Your dignity. Even when it rips your heart out to do it. I stood in the doorway, bag slung over my shoulder, staring at the woman I had once thought I would grow old with. "I'm not angry," I said quietly. "I'm just tired." She nodded again, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know," I said. And I meant it. I knew she hadn't set out to hurt me. But intentions don't erase consequences. And some scars are too deep to pretend away. I stepped out into the night, the door clicking shut softly behind me. No dramatic slamming. No shouted goodbyes. Just a quiet end to a story that had once meant everything. And as I walked down the empty street, the city lights blurring around me, I realized. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of who I had been with her. The man who trusted blindly. The man who believed love could survive anything. That man was gone. And in his place, there was only me. Bruised. Broken. But still standing. The first night alone felt unreal. I rented a small, nondescript apartment on the outskirts of the city, 1 bedroom, creaky floors, the faint smell of old wood and rain. It wasn't much. But it was mine. No shared memories lingering in the corners. No silent ghosts pressing against the walls. Just space. Empty. Lonely. Raw. But space, nonetheless. The days were hardest in the beginning. Waking up and reaching instinctively for her. For the familiar warmth that was no longer there. Making coffee for 2 before realizing there was no one else to hand a cup to. Seeing something funny online and reaching for my phone to share it. Only to stop midway, the emptiness swallowing me whole. Grief is not a straight line. It's a labyrinth. Some days, I walked tall, breathing in the newness of my life, feeling proud of the strength it took to walk away. Other days, the smallest thing, a smell, a song, a memory, would reduce me to a hollow ache. And yet, slowly, imperceptibly, I began to rebuild. I went back to old hobbies I had abandoned during our marriage. I picked up my guitar again. But the memories softened over time. The sharp edges dulled. The anger faded. And what remained was a quiet, bittersweet gratitude for what we had. And what we could no longer be. Months later, I ran into an old friend at a bookstore. She asked how I was. Not the polite, superficial kind of asking, but the real kind. The kind that waits for an honest answer. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever. "I'm healing," I said. Not healed. Not perfect. Not done. But healing. And somehow, that was enough. One night, sitting on the balcony of my little apartment, a cup of tea in hand, I watched the city lights blink against the dark sky. I thought about all the ways my life had shattered. All the ways I had been forced to rebuild from the rubble. And I realized something. Maybe the most painful endings aren't punishments. Maybe they're invitations. Invitations to grow. To change. To become someone you were always meant to be. But never would have become if you had stayed. I'm not the same man who once thought love alone could conquer everything. I'm not as naive. Not as trusting. But I'm stronger now. Quieter. More certain of my own worth. And someday, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, I'll find love again. The kind that doesn't need secrets to survive. The kind that stands tall even when the winds of doubt try to tear it apart. The kind that chooses me openly, fully, and without hesitation. Until then, I'll keep choosing myself. Day by day. Step by step. Breath by breath. Because sometimes, the greatest love story you'll ever live Is the one you write for yourself after everyone else has walked away?